Today's guest is Lottie Unwin, founder of the Copy Club, a huge network for marketers to share their know-how, their advice, and their experience. Lottie started her career at Proctor Gamble, then made the move to startup life as head of growth for Propercorn. It was at that point that she noticed that something was missing. A space for community, a space for learnings, a space for ambitious marketers to excel in their careers together. That was the birth of the Copy Club, and in their words, they're the marketing mates you've been looking for. So this episode is packed with tangible advice for business owners and for marketers, and I'm so excited for you to hear it. So without further ado, Lottie Unwin.
A friend of mine, Jess Barlow, did a presentation to me about 18 months ago on the power of LinkedIn because she'd used it to build an online training business she was launching, and I found that incredibly inspiring. That made me go in a bit. And then the more effort you start to put into those things, the more you see the payback. And I think, there was a commitment point last summer where I was like, right, I'm going to post a lot and I'm going to not think about it and I'm going to put myself out there and I'm not really going to worry about my message, but I'm just going to be very visible. And that's done a huge amount for the business and the community. Literally, we would be nothing if it wasn't for my LinkedIn audience, which is bizarre because I'm hardly an influencer. I say that as though I'm sitting there on my 2 million followers.
So we were just talking about your morning. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So I was having a bit of a low energy start to the day after quite a high energy day yesterday. And I had an onboarding chat with one of our new members, getting to know them before they come into the community. And they just went straight in with some really sage, but really tough, big questions. And sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea with this real feeling of kind of just give me strength. I'm on this, I'm working on this, I'm thinking about this stuff. And I'm so, so, so grateful for that feedback. But let's just think about the way we build relationships. And maybe there's a moment to acknowledge that someone's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. And I think that's kind of, that's what we were just catching up on. It's just a recognition of how much you don't know and that what you see publicly is really, really the tip of that iceberg. And I think just to remain super mindful that there's a suite of hard graph that sits underneath that.
So was the feedback a little bit savage?
It wasn't savage, it was big. It wasn't hey, have you thought about changing this color? It was your business model, maybe it's not right. And it's yeah, maybe it's not right, but maybe today is not the day for this to come as news to me. And maybe there's a recognition that I'm probably aware that there are other models and I've probably thought about it quite a lot.
Yeah.
For kind of obvious reasons.
Unsolicited feedback can be quite fun, I think. As in, not to give, I think it's awful.
Just run around the world, just smashing out unsolicited feedback. That is fun.
I found sometimes when people give it to me, it's oh, wow, that's really interesting, thanks. Other times it's similar to what you said, there is a plan here. We've thought about this. We've been there. I think the worst, and it's definitely a pet peeve of mine, is when I start talking, somebody asks me about the business, I start talking to them, here's what we're doing at WOW, and so on. And then they jump in with a solution. And sometimes it's always well-intended, but it's you've got to give the space to hear the context before you jump in with a solution, because it can be painful. And then I'm stuck in two minds. It's one, I can let this person continue for the sake of being polite and letting them continue. Or two, I can jump in and just be hey, no, I've thought about this, but it's never fun.
That line where you jump in and say, hey, actually, I've thought about it, sounds really defensive and sounds like you've got your back up. And so I think actually it's a bit of a catch-22 in that situation. All you have to do is listen to the feedback and say thank you. Feedback's always a gift. Always say thank you, and then you can decide whether to return it or not.
Yeah.
But I think I guess in giving feedback, it's the question of, are you interested in some feedback? Ask for permission before you give it, and then frame things as, have you thought about this territory, which allows someone the opportunity to go, yeah, funny enough, I've thought about that loads. And then you have a space where there's context.
Exactly.
But I think feedback without permission is a dangerous game.
Yeah. Is that creating the space? I think that's it.
Yeah, I think those questions create the space.
Yeah, not necessarily giving it there and then, but saying, hey, as you said, would you like to have some feedback? And then actually creating a space, creating a different call, going somewhere else. If you're sitting in one room, go to the other room. It just changes the dynamic.
And then how would you like to receive the feedback? Do you want it on a call? Do you want it as a voice note? Do you want it as an email? Like, I don't necessarily want it right now in my WhatsApp. Like, just a bit of sensitivity, depending on the context and trying to understand what else might be going on for someone.
So I would imagine there are some people listening to this conversation thinking, geez, wow, we really need to be so sensitive to the people we work with and how we give them feedback. Because I've heard that from the kind of old school business people.
Yeah.
But I would challenge that in saying, like, people change, people's expectations of work change. And we're now in a position where people don't commit to being a certain, you know, worker for their entire life. They move around a lot. So as an employer or as a manager, so much of your job is about empowering people, inspiring people, and, you know, making sure that they maybe not like you, but respect you enough. And I think giving feedback in this way helps with that.
Yeah, well, I'd say go away, read Radical Candor. Anyone that starts in the Copy Club team gets sent it on day one. We have a policy around it. It's like fundamental to the way we operate as a business. And one of the key ideas in the book, for anyone that hasn't read it, is the importance of being good at receiving feedback, and then the importance of giving good feedback. And those two pillars are like essential to a culture in which feedback is like important. If you don't give it well and then you don't receive it well, then you're not going to foster the right environment.
Can you think of a time when you've received really bad feedback and then also really good feedback?
I receive really good feedback all the time from my head of people specifically, who I've had very like some constructive conversations around like how we both like to receive feedback. So I know that she prefers feedback in writing so that she can have time to reflect on it. She knows I prefer feedback in like short Slack messages or in a voice note because that allows me to move fast, but it's always with permission. So I did a talk yesterday. She sent me a Slack message saying, would you like some feedback on that? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm in a really high energy mood. Go for it. 2 super quick points, like a green tick emoji from me. And I've really learnt. And that's like, no love lost. There's no emotion in that. Yeah. It's just really, really straightforward. And I think that example it like demonstrates how it goes well. I can think of a time recently where I've given really bad feedback.
What was that?
Where I, and Hope won't mind me saying this because she pulled me up on it. Hope, who was the first employee of the Copy Club, asked what I would call a really bad question in the Copy Club Slack group, where she sort of said to a sub-community within our gang, like, hey, how can we do this better? And it was just like a really open-ended, abstract question. I probably misquoted her there, but it was not a question that anyone was going to answer. And so my approach was to write on LinkedIn that I thought it was a bad question, which is clearly not the way that you say to someone, hey, would you like this? Like, is there space for feedback? And I'd given that feedback to her privately, but I'd assumed that she was like up for that being public fodder, which is like a complete assumption. So I don't need to say that, but don't do that. Don't be a dick.
Yeah. It's a good example. I remember giving, terrible. It makes me cringe feedback, right? So early on in the days of WoW, my view of business was watching Harvey Specter in Suits. Yeah. That's how you do things, right? You say the big moment at the end, you make the joke or the pun, and then you walk out the room.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. And so that's what I did. And thank God people on my team who are still in the team today were just like, nah, that's not it.
It's not going to work.
So there was one time in particular, it's painful to talk about, but basically, you know, it was a client presentation, and at the end of it, once the client was gone, I kind of just stood there and I was like, I'm so disappointed. And then I was like, this is, you know, I can't believe that's just happened. You know, how did we allow that to happen? And it was just so accusatory and just unkind and kind of not nice, and almost like movie moment where it's, you know, the big words are said and then one person walks out of the room. It was just so backwards. Yeah. Thank God they gave me feedback. And then at a similar time, another person gave me feedback. And now it's like, I get it. So through learning.
How would you have handled that now?
I'd have said, cool, right, how do we feel about that? How did it all go? And they'd have said, yeah, it was all right. And I'd say, right, what, you know, why is it that the call didn't run as smoothly as we wanted? Okay. And then, you know, because if you know something's gone wrong, you know, you don't need to be told. And I think that's a really key part of it. But so they gave me that feedback. It was great. I improved. And I definitely go towards the soft side of things now. But I just think to some of the clients we've had and some of the conversations I've had with them back when I was managing their campaigns, and I would always walk away feeling happy and positive, even when the topic that we just discussed was not good. It was fundamentally not good. Let's say a campaign wasn't going well. Let's say a client wasn't happy. I left feeling good and excited. It just got to a point where I was like, why can't I
do more of that because that really works. And that was a tough conversation we had, but I now feel excited about working with this person. And there's a level of like zen and a level of calmness that you can give to somebody with feedback. And it's difficult because you've got to take some of the emotion out of it. But I see that a lot from our clients. And these are the people who have built big businesses, assembled amazing teams and kept those teams.
Yeah.
So I always try to do more of that.
Nice.
So tell me about the Copy Club.
Sure. Copy Club is a community for marketing types, so founders down to marketing execs in businesses under pressure to think entrepreneurially. So that can be anyone from a startup founder at their kitchen table through to someone in a big blue chip who's put in a small part of the business tackled with building a challenger brand, which is the situation more and more. So that's who we're for. And we're a community. So we exist to make our members' lives easier. That is both technically, like if you are stuck, if you need a freelancer tomorrow, if you don't know how to run a one-to-one with your direct report, like all of these technical things that come into our jobs in marketing in like the broader sense of the word. Or if you just feel really lonely and actually what you need isn't technical or functional, it's emotional. You just need a feeling of being part of something. So we offer a huge amount of kind of stuff, but also good feeling and good vibe in making people feel less alone.
And so where did the idea come from?
Well, I kind of have two versions of the story. One is like the way that I've wrapped it up in the way as a founder, you kind of like tell your own narrative, and the other is what really happened. So we'll go with the what really happened one. And that was I left Propercorn. I left P&G. I was at Proctor Gamble, started my career there, where I like skipped into work in my suit and like thought I was going to hate big corporate life, but actually just bloody loved it. Loved all the training programs, like sucked it all up. But I was kind of bouncing off the walls because I was way too high energy. So I went to Propercorn where I was head of marketing, like big inverted commas. I was 24. I did not know what that meant. I was just given a job title because they needed something to pay me more than other people in the business. And I found it really tough. So I had those two problems. I felt really, really alone. And I felt like I had loads of functional, practical questions and I just didn't know where to take them because no one else in the business knew anything about this. I'd been hired to be the most senior. So I started chatting to people, going for coffees, because that's the way I learn. Those coffees were great. Everyone who I had coffee with would love the other people I had coffees with. So I started a supper club. And again, that was just one dinner that happened to go really well, that became another dinner and became another dinner. So there was no idea. It was a real evolution. It was, I need to build my network. I want my network to connect with each other because I think if we all went for beers, it would be really fun. We went for beers. It was really fun. Let's do it again. That little mailing list got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's sort of been a snowball, like from those first dinners, which were now like 7-8 years ago.
Wow.
It's kind of just like rolled and rolled and rolled like down this big old hill, like collecting more people as we go because there's a need, like it really, really resonates. And so that's been the idea. It was like a problem I had that it turned out a load of other people had. And that's still kind of all we are today.
And so I've got a load of questions for the Copy Club, but just to understand, can you tell me about your time at Propercorn? Because that as a business had such a huge rise and a huge amount of success in a very short amount of time.
So I joined when we had Tesco distribution and the business was about 7 million revenue. And I was there for just over 3 years when we won Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Asda, Co-op, like it grew and grew and grew. And that meant that the team size changed. It meant that we hugely grew up as a business. My brief when I came in was kind of take all of this brilliant creative energy, which is still what makes that brand so special today, like proper as it's now known. When I was there, it was Propercorn. It's now rebranded and it has chips and it has all of this product extension. It's gone on such a super exciting journey. But that creativity was so raw and there was no kind of sense of ROI. There was no focus on whether that spend was working or how it was delivering against objective. So my job was kind of to be almost like the bitter pill in the business. Like I had to come in and ask all the like tough grown up questions, which is deeply ironic because I was nothing but a grown up, of like how that money was being spent. And it was a really, really tough journey. Like I learned an incredible amount from it. I have so much respect for all of the ultimately really strong relationships I built when I was there. But it was so hard because no one in the business spoke my language. And I'd come from a world where we were all just clones. At P&G, everyone is recruited to be identikit to those around them. And that makes for a very special work environment in some cases, but it has fundamental flaws in terms of like lack of diversity of thought and like inability to teach you different communication styles. So I found that really tough and had quite a rocky time kind of as I moved into startups.
Were there any particular moments? So, you've got the Copy Club, which is soon to be born in a fairly gradual way. But right now, you're in a super fast growth company. You've got a ton of responsibility. You may feel a bit out of depth. Were there any particular moments when you were just like, geez, this is difficult? Like any stories?
So many. There was one night, it was like 10 p.m. and we had this cold office north of King's Cross, and I was there Googling what is an influencer, trying to understand what the hell this new channel was, in this like empty office with like cleaners sweeping up popcorn around me. And that was one moment where I kind of moved over to Facebook and sent out a load of like, hey, can we go for coffee messages? And then I really messed things up. So like I've told this story before of when I pushed through a media buy. I was obsessed with reach and frequency because I'd been on the P&G school and I'd been sent to Geneva to sit in a classroom and be taught that like reach and frequency were key to brand building. So it's like, we need more channels, we need to be doing Facebook ads, and we need to be doing out of home. And so I pushed through a Facebook campaign and a out of home media buy, but we had no budget. So if you're going to spend 20k on old inventory with an out of home provider, you're going to get dross. And that's what we got. We got random billboards. We did it in Birmingham and one other city. It was like a city trial so that I could prove that reach and frequency was like the be all and end all. And I took the team up on the train, and there's some really sweet photos of us all in our popcorn t-shirts with our rucksacks, like proper kind of day campers, hiking around Birmingham under a dual carriageway flyover where we were following a map for our ad. And you get to this ad and there's like 8 lanes of traffic and this like shady flyover, and you just think, this is an absolute fuck up. And I had to kind of really stand there to my team, and I guess it's like one of the first moments where I had to, like, as a leader, very publicly fail and say, yeah, this is stupid, like, agreed, like, let's go for coffee, but I'm going to eat my humble pie.
Did that hurt when you had to admit that?
Yeah, it really hurt. But it hurt because I was confused. Like it really destabilized my sense of what I knew in the world. Like, I really had bought into this school of marketing, and I really believed that this was the right thing to do. And I believed in media owners, and I had thought it was right. So it didn't hurt in that way that, like, if you snog someone on a night out and you know you're in trouble, that hurts. There's a different kind of hurt when you're like, I don't know what's true anymore. So it was more like rocky than pain, and just left me feeling quite like reeling and like ego really knocked. Like, how do you understand your value if the training that is what you think makes you distinct actually has huge cracks?
And so what's the answer there? How did you do it?
The answer is that you take it right back to what's the objective at any given time, which I think is like fundamental to good startup marketing. So you don't get wrapped up in all of the things you could do, but you look at what you have at your disposal and what really matters. And so what we really doubled down on at that time in Propercorn was trade marketing. So what really mattered was availability. If we were in the right stores, in the right places in store, and we had standout packaging, then the packaging would be our biggest advertising touch point. You know, I had so many out-of-home billboards in the shelf space that was all over the retail estate that we like won by the time I left the business. And that's, you know, that's not my success. That's a really strong creative commercial team. But that was visibility. So if that visibility is really effective because the packaging is killer and that visibility is in the right place, you're done. So we focused on absolutely wowing buyers, like really elaborate like experiences and really kind of theatrical product reveals to make us like the most exciting, interesting brand, and really put our focus in kind of 10 key relationships and not the market, not worrying about end customers. And then we did a really big packaging project. So how do you make that logo? How do you make the illustration on that logo? How do you make the color, the print quality work as hard as possible? And those kind of became the 2 big strategic choices. And I think they were the right ones.
Brilliant. So you touched on the Copy Club through the kind of community angle and what it looks like to be a part of it, and we can touch on that more. But I'd love to understand what that looks like from the perspective of a founder.
So the Copy Club as a member, as you say, is you join, you're part of a community that gives you access to a Slack group, to a load of online events, to quarterly parties, supper clubs, a whole ton of stuff. But it's £15 a month. And it's an inherently unscalable business model. Like it's a farcically terrible business model in the community in itself, because what you say is it's got to be really cheap because I want it to be as accessible as possible. So I really want as many people as possible to have access to that, because I just don't believe people should feel lonely. Mm-hmm. But it's got to be bespoke and it's got to be really high touch, because that community's got to feel really real. So as a business owner, the Copy Club starts with this community. That's the heart of what we do, but that community enables some really interesting, more commercial opportunities. So we run a matchmaking service, which is our version of recruitment, which is really needed for our members because they have a difficult time with recruiters. I don't need to labour the point there of the horror stories. And for our hiring managers who also don't love working with a typical recruitment market. And then we have brand hackers that are our equivalent of loosely our equivalent of an agency. Mm-hmm. So brand hackers are outsourced marketing teams that fill the gap for founder-led businesses before they're big enough to hire a full-time team.
Got it. So we've got the community, which is the core.
Yeah.
And then we've got the recruitment element. And then we've got the actual kind of agency. We can actually come in, assemble a team and do it for you.
Yeah. So it's like, I've kind of been talking about it recently as an octopus business model, and thinking about...
And by octopus, you octopus energy? Or
no, I mean little limbs.
Oh, nice.
I mean, it's limmy. So I get so much advice, and this comes back to what we were saying earlier about unsolicited feedback, actually. The unsolicited feedback I get the most is like, you're trying to do too much in this kind of like, I'm sort of going to be your mum or dad way. And I hear that, like, I'm knackered, fair enough. But what that fails to recognize is how intrinsically linked all the parts of what we're doing are. Like, they're not tangents, they feed back into the whole. So matchmaking means that we have loads of conversations with phenomenal brands who then go and join the community. And we're also meeting lots of people who are looking for jobs who then go and join the community. Once they've joined the community, they then go and start their own businesses, or they look for training opportunities with us, or they bring other people into the community. So it's totally symbiotic. Like, each of those little legs, and the two big ones are matchmaking and brand hackers, but there are other little limbs in my 8-legged creature, all feed back into the whole.
That's brilliant. And so what does the growth look like from a business perspective over the past few years?
Well, we are both 8 years old and 18 months out of the block. So we're kind of young and old. So there's been me plugging away at this for a long time. Until about 2.5 years ago, I had no seed of a thought that this would ever make money. In fact, I was kind of really at odds with that as an idea. I was doing this because I thought it was important and I was making people's lives a little bit better. And because I'm not a saint, it was making me really good at job interviews. So every time I got asked, how would you deal with a difficult situation? I'd be like, well, I just contact my network that I've built of 300 really interesting people. And they'd be like, yeah, strong answer, noted. And so I was like, oh, this is a good thing. And then I went freelance and begun to see kind of the power of it, and also begun to think differently about how I saw things. So if I made more money, could I put more time into the community? Right. And if there was more revenue coming in, then the community could be so much better. And if people want more from us, then they're prepared to pay for it. So why am I not letting them? So there's a bit of a flip moment then. And so that was kind of when the business was born. That was probably only 2.5 years ago. And then 18 months ago, whenever, I'm getting my time frames around because it feels like Corona's been here for forever. But when kind of lockdown hit, that's when we had a real surge for lots of different reasons. But Corona was really good for us, actually, really awful for the world, but really good for community. It's like one of the small positive things that have come out of this time. Mm-hmm. So the growth since then has been pretty astounding. We've gone from me and an assistant to a full-time team of 20. We've got 4 open roles at the moment. If anyone wants to come and work with us, we'll definitely be over 30 by the end of the year. So all of that's moving really quickly. And we're doing that in a way that is really sustainable. So we're entirely self-funded. And I love it that way because it means that we have no external pressure and we can choose the speed of our own growth. But I also, I'm doing that very carefully. So, we lost all of our business overnight the day the UK went into lockdown, and Hope and I were sitting in India, and I looked at my personal bank balance and I did the maths of how long I could keep me, her and our intern paid with no income, and thought probably can keep this going for a year if I like clean out everything I've squirreled away over time. And I never want to be in that position again.
Nice.
So slow and steady is our approach.
So in the last 18 months, you've gone from 2 people to 20 and hiring another 4.
Yeah.
So that is wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's been a lot.
So what I want to understand is, what is your job? Like, as you've grown as a business person, have you felt yourself become less of a manager and more of a leader?
Absolutely. So I think I get a new job every 3 months, but no one tells me I'm promoted and no one writes me a new spec. So my game every quarter is to like guess my role. And I've kind of watched this happen over time, and now I'm quite conscious of it. So every quarter I try and really like engage brain in like, what is my new job? And the downside is that for a long time I didn't have a choice in what my job was. So there were quarters where I was like, I think I'm an FD now. Like, oh God, what is that? Or like, I think I need to be HR because that's a gap that's now opened up. And now I can design that a little bit more in terms of like the team I put around me.
Yeah.
My job today is absolutely to lead strategy. So if I'm not thinking about where we're going to be in 18 months, no one else is. And I'm not thinking about it enough. So that's where I need to be pulling more time.
Yeah.
My job is to spread the word. So like doing stuff like this is absolutely my job, and talking as much as I can, as enthusiastically as I can about why this stuff matters and why people should seek out community because it makes your life better. And I think my job is to nurture the team. And I think that is a really meaty part of what I do. And that's making sure that they feel inspired and supported, and also firefighting. Like, I'll spend time every week just solving big burning problems because right now I'm the best person to do it. I'm also actively involved in a lot of our brand hackers work. So I am the quality control of everything that goes out of the business. It's still, of course it will always be an incredibly personal brand. I put myself at the front of it very publicly. And so that means that I have a degree of hands on everything.
So I really like the idea of this 3-month new job and then without a promotion, because there's just so much to that. One is the leadership, the self-awareness needed to say, okay, I actually need to pick up different roles and responsibilities. But then 2 is just the brutal reality of being a founder, which is you don't get the good job praise. Like, nobody is really there. But that's something else. So on the roles and responsibilities.
Such a sad little aside.
Yeah, it is quite sad.
It is quite sad. There are ways of solving that. My tip would be tell the team that's how it feels, and make that aware. Like, my team know that I need a bit of love too, and I'm so pleased I made that clear. So I'll just say that as like a little heartfelt.
That's nice.
You're not out there on your own.
Not out there on your own. It's definitely something I've felt. And then there are moments where you get a ton of validation all at once.
Yes.
And I was speaking to somebody sent me a message. Hey, somebody's just offered to buy my business. What do you make of this? What do you think? So I had the chat with them and I was like, first of all, what's the offer? Give me all the juice and I'll share my thoughts. And it turns out it was a very similar offer to something that I've been given in the past, different company, but essentially, hey, let's take your entire company and all the ownership off of you, but we're going to help you reach your dreams. And it was just a load of, so I got some very strongly worded feedback when I asked somebody about my particular case. And it was brilliant because I've never heard that person speak in such a savage way, but loved it. So I then prefaced it in the right way, so good that you've got this opportunity. That's wild that there's there's interest. Point 2, the offer is a load of crap.
Yeah.
Bin it.
You know what you're doing.
Bin it. But also point 3, just remember, like, you're out here doing this on your own. There's a ton of responsibility on your shoulders, ton of stress. And you've also got no boss to say, well done, or give you any kind of feedback.
Yeah.
So when there's somebody in the market who you know of and admire and respect, and they turn around and say, hey, we could incorporate you into our company, we could buy your business, that is such a huge amount of validation all in one blow. And it's very easy to get swept up in the excitement.
It's overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. So when this has happened now more recently, whether it's investment offers, it's just like a quick glance. Is it commercially viable? Is it within our plans? Every single time so far it's been no. And it's like, thanks so much, let's revisit in future. But going back to the kind of every 3 months new job is something that I've felt as well. So we've had a similar, I think there were 5 of us this time last year. They're in 17, we're hiring for a bunch of people. And it did take me quite a while to realize this. And now I think I've sorted a process for myself that works, which is every quarter I have a new job description and I write that job description and I communicate it with the team. And, you know, I ask people, does this make, I still need to do the asking part. I've done the job description, I've saved it on Notion. I need to actually ask people about it. Yeah. But it says quite clearly, like if there's anything relating to holidays, if there's anything relating to the mental health days that we give and what that looks like, or if it's anything relating to the office and the roads that we have, or if we're moving office, that's no longer me. I can't answer those questions. That's somebody else. Whereas here's what I do quite clearly. But then this is going to happen again, because if we, you know, grow at the same rate that we're growing, there are big chunks of the business, like you mentioned, quality control. That's a big piece. So if I'm no longer doing that, how can I make sure that there's somebody better than me doing that, which is definitely doable, and those people exist in the business, and that's exciting. But then it's a case of, okay, this has gone from my job description and my roles and responsibilities to potential kind of promotions to, okay, but wait, we need to think about the wider org structure of the business. And then it's a case of, okay, great, well, what does, you know, if we're 17 people, what does 30 people look like? And then once you get to that conversation, it's, but do we want a business of 30, 50, 80 people?
Hold up, what do I actually want?
Exactly. So it's a difficult thing to do. But I really like just that idea of, new job, but no promotion.
Yeah, you just need to recognize it. And then ask people around you to help celebrate those promotions. Like, we just hit our revenue target for last year and my boyfriend sent me a bottle of champagne. I was like, that's great. Like, that's exactly what you need the people around you to do. So if you can't get it from your colleagues, find it elsewhere in your world.
Who inspires you?
Oh, so many people. I'm definitely going to waffle the answer to this question. I'm really inspired by like the big personal brand, like names, like what Carrie Rose is doing and Stephen Bartlett. Like, obviously I watch all of that personal branding stuff with a huge like awe and wonder actually at the sheer work that goes into it. I think the strategy for sure, but the commitment and the bravery to like financially back that, which I don't think anyone sees, but like those people are putting a huge amount of focus in that. And I find that really inspiring. It's something I'm thinking about a lot. I'm really inspired by great brand work. Like, that is still what I love. And I could be building a community full time, but I choose to still be working in marketing, actively in marketing, because I still think that what Oatly are doing and the way Thursday have built their brand and like the conversations that must happen in those rooms to get to that kind of output, I still think that's really thrilling and is the stuff that I want to be learning kind of the most about, and the community stuff for me is a byproduct of that.
So seeing people like Stephen Bartlett and Carrie Rose, I think two brilliant examples, do what they're doing, does that then inspire you to actually post more on LinkedIn and rethink your strategy and refine and test new things?
I think I'm more directly inspired by how much it works. So a friend of mine, Jess Barlow, did a presentation to me about 18 months ago on the power of LinkedIn, because she'd used it to build an online training business she was launching. And I found that incredibly inspiring. That made me go like in a bit. And then the more effort you start to put into those things, the more you see the payback. And I think, you know, there was a commitment point last summer where I was like, right, I'm going to post a lot and I'm going to not think about it. And I'm going to put myself out there and I'm not really going to worry about my message, but I'm just going to be very visible. And that's done a huge amount for the business and the community. Like, literally, we would be nothing if it wasn't for my LinkedIn audience, which is bizarre because I'm hardly an influencer. Like, I say that as though I'm like sitting there on my 2 million followers, and I'm really not. And I think I'm now at a really interesting inflection point where it's like, right, well, if it's like a Mario Kart metaphor, like what's the next level? Like, what does that then look like? How do I level that up? And knowing that there's a business case for it, like, I said to one of my team the other day, well, like, it's not as though someone follows me around taking photographs of stuff all the time. And she was like, but there could be. I was like, whoa, no. Like,
there we go.
But you start to think those things.
I love that.
And I think that's, then you start to ask those big questions and like, do I really want to be that person? I think the answer is no, but I think I really understand the corporate value of that. So I've got to kind of jostle with it.
So one of our advisors, Craig Fenton, he is a director of strategy and operations at Google for essentially all of Europe. And I remember he hosted a 4-day strategy session just for me and the plans for WOW. I think at that specific time. So he's our advisor. So he helps
That's insane.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's awesome. So I went to Google, we had the whole, session, and the question he asked me was just, it's such a simple question, but it takes a certain person to ask it and then for you to actually feel it and think about it. At the time, I think we just reached $5,000 a month in revenue. That was big.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Yeah.
Serious deal. This is turning into a business. And he was like, how do we 10x this?
Yeah.
And I was like, Craig, come on, chill. Like, what's going on?
No, but it's the right
and
question.
He was like, how do we make it $50,000 a month? And, obviously, easy question to ask, very difficult question to answer. And I had a call with him recently when we just crossed, the $80,000 mark. And he was like, look, just don't forget, we did that. No problem. How do we 10x? And again, and it makes you think in a different way. So bringing it back to what you're saying about personal branding, I had a chat with, the team at WOW who run my personal brand. And I wanted to try to take a bit of Craig Fenton into that. So I said, what needs to be true? We're on, 20,000 followers right now. What would need to be true for us to be on 100,000 followers within, 6 months or within a year?
But those are the tweaks on that question that turn it from a like, shut up, 10x, go away, to a, what would need to be true, or what's stopping me? What are the barriers in my way? Those like little questions that break down that task. And for me, like recently especially, I've become really obsessed with documents. So I've really taken the like Amazon Kool-Aid where you write the one pager before every meeting. And I do some work for Elizabeth Scarlett. It's a fashion accessories brand, and the CEO there is an amazing amazing guy, and he's completely obsessed with documents. He'll always say to me, where's the recommendation? And the recommendation means a very specific kind of document. And so I find questions like that, I can either go, how do I 10x this? Like whatever.
Yeah.
Or I can go home and put the kettle on and open a Word document and literally break that question down.
Yeah.
And that to your question of what is my job, right now, my job is to produce a load of documents that unpack big questions and reduce them into like strategic business decisions.
Yeah, I think it's such a good framework to go off.
Yeah.
Because as you said, what would need to be true, or why can't we, or what would need to be true? And then from there, it becomes really clear, because you say, well, you need loads more engagement. Okay, great. So what content works really well and gets that engagement? How can we do more of that without compromising the personal brand equity, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to chase likes for the sake of it, followers for the sake of it. That's not what we do. It becomes, we need more written content. Great. How do we do more? Well, we don't have enough capacity to do that. Great. Does that mean we need to hire someone? Are they part-time? Are they full-time? We need more mainstream exposure. We need you to be seen more as a personal branding guy. Great. How do we do that? Does that mean working with a PR company? Does that mean, featuring on Business Insider and Forbes and getting on Sky News? So all of these things, when you ask it in that way, it's blue sky thinking, anything goes.
And I think if you also ask the question of what would our business look like if we'd done that, then those answers don't seem so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So if you were 10x, your revenue is 10x, therefore the fact that you've hired to get you to that point is completely logical. So it's just about thinking about these things as holistic riddles. But I think it's about being asked the right question by the right person and having, it actually comes right back to what we were saying about seeing feedback in the right way, like accepting that feedback and really hearing it and not seeing that as a flippant remark, but taking that as like genuinely the piece of advice that might unlock astronomical growth.
Yeah. I like that part of what would the business look like if this were to go well. And I just think of the two examples. One is, okay, we want to start a podcast. How can we start a podcast? Or we can bootstrap it. We can record it on a phone. Or we can do it properly. We can hire somebody as brilliant as Mariam to run this whole thing.
This is ironic because I have a bootstrap podcast and you have a slick podcast. Right. And so we can have like the race of the shit podcast against the great podcast.
But so when we look around, even in this room, we've got the proper microphones set up, we've got the cameras, we've got the people
legit.
Who own it. And what does that mean if you do it consistently every week for the foreseeable future? What does that look like? And then the other example there was, I realized that I was kind of basing our growth plans off, okay, great, we're doing 400K ARR, like 400K annual. How can we get it to 500? How can we get it to 600? And then a bunch of stuff happened. I realized the business is never going to properly grow in the way that I want it to if I keep asking questions like that. I need to say, hypothetically, we turn over 5 million a year. What strategic decisions did I make when we were 10 people turning over X 100,000 that allowed us to get here faster? And that was a reason we hired a full-time operations manager rather than finding somebody in a team who was really good with operations and saying, hey, why don't you dual your job and do half and half?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the podcast. So there's a level of like investment in certain things which you really believe will drive the business forward. And on both cases, they've been right so far.
Yeah, and if you're in a position where you're financially able to make some bets, both in terms of like the speed to which you want to see returns and like where you've got yourself to at that point. And I think it's interesting because our businesses have had really, like we're kind of at quite similar points in terms of team size, in terms of like we've mirrored each other in a really nice way. And we're both now at a position where we're going like, yeah, let's make some big bets. Like let's do a couple of things really, really well. You seem to be slightly clearer on this than I am, but it's definitely a work in progress.
We're getting there.
Yeah, exactly.
So this podcast is called Stamp Your Mark.
Yes.
It's all about the mark you leave on the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of that ties into, the personal branding work that you've been doing, which I think is brilliant. But, on a more macro level, like what is the mark? What impact do you want to have?
Yeah. I think there's two things. One is that they're interlinked. One is that I think community is incredibly important, and feeling alone is not an acceptable place to be. It's not something that as a society we should allow happen. And I think we do allow it to happen in a way that's like pretty unacceptable of the way we interact with other people and the way we organize our own lives. So that's kind of one thing. It's like a bit of a crusade against loneliness. The other thing is an impact on the way we see ourselves and our value and our ability to be vulnerable and human in the workplace. I think professionalism is quite a toxic concept. And I think it's a mask for a huge, it just allows us to mask a whole load of insecurity and a whole mess of assumptions about what makes you worth your salt in the world. And I really hope that I can build a internal culture within Copy Club HQ that disbands that entirely and radiates some of that externally. So that's actually kind of what motivates most of my personal brand stuff, is just trying to be more human, more publicly, to hopefully inspire other people that they can do the same.
Brilliant answer. Final question. It's kind of a question, statement question, one of those longer ones. But if you were to imagine yourself speaking directly to your younger self, perhaps 18-year-old Lottie.
Yeah.
And, there's that one thing you just want to, shake into her head and say, this is how you got to do it. This is what you need to do. Or, perhaps it's about being kind to yourself. Perhaps it's the loneliness. Perhaps it's work ethic. What is the message that you would want to give to yourself? And the wider hope here is that can then be some really direct, no fluff advice for a lot of people listening.
Well, it's not be kind to yourself, because I scream that at myself every single day and I'm useless at it. So I can't say that from a position of authority now. I think it's just a loud affirmation that it's going to be okay. I think the anxiety I went through from my late teens to kind of my early 30s, I think I'm just out of the woods on it, which was this crippling feeling of never being good enough, that now is still there, but it's a quieter voice, and a lot of therapy and a lot of thinking about it, it's really silenced that voice mostly. But I think I would really find a way to scream into younger me's head that it was going to be okay and that I was good enough. Super reassuring. Love it. That's it. That's the podcast done. Thank you so much for coming on. Such a joy. I loved it. Boom.